Time to round up the week in politics here in Massachusetts with our incisive politics reporter, Adam Reilly. Adam, good morning.
Mark, let's round it up. Let's do it.
Let's do it. I know that you were watching Boston city races in particular because of Marty Walsh and trying to see what influence might he be trying to exert and what might happen with that.
Yeah, I've been sort of obsessed with how much clout the former mayor still has. He backed two candidates in the at-large city council race, Frank Baker and Alexandra Valdez. Neither of them made the cut. Neither of them cracked the top four. The fourth place finisher who did make the cut, Henry Santana, is a favorite of Mayor Michelle Wu's. She was freed up, given that she didn't have an opponent, given that Josh Kraft dropped out,
Right,
to throw her political campaign's muscle behind Henry Santana. He got that fourth place slot, and it wasn't even close. So at least in this particular moment, this particular context, looking at this proxy fight between Mayor Wu and former Mayor Walsh, it was Mayor Wu who won.
And I feel we were talking earlier about this, as we always do when we approach this and we say, what are we going to talk about?
Yep.
I think there is in these two figures of Marty Walsh and Michelle Wu a representation of what's going on with Democrats in this week after the election, of course, and has something to do with generational change, right?
You could make that case. Now, I have some sympathies for Marty Walsh on that front because I believe he's Gen X, as am I,
Okay.
and everyone tends to forget about Gen X. Mayor Wu, I think she's a millennial, right?
I can't keep track of all these.
Qualifies as a millennial. So, yeah, you could make a case that the millennial won out. The two candidates who are being backed by Marty Walsh, Frank Baker, I believe, venturing into delicate territory here, a baby boomer, and Alexandra Valdez, who didn't make the cut either. I think she's a millennial or even Gen Y,
Right,
or Gen Z rather. So yeah, there's a valence that involves generational approaches to politics and generational identity there.
Yeah, and I think also because when you think Marty Walsh, you think of his connections to Joe Biden.
You do. That's a good point.
And now you look at Michelle Wu consolidating her power here in Boston and also doing it while she's raised her profile nationally as a real fighter against President Trump and his agenda.
Yeah, there's no question that the reason that she crushed Josh Kraft the way she did in the prelim is because she went down to Washington, D.C. and stood up for Boston the way she did. I mean, yeah, that definitely, that sealed it for her. And you could tell, I mean, I remember you and I talking about it right after she'd gone and made that trip. Her team was putting out social media clips of her
Yes.
exchange with congressional Republicans in real time. So they knew they had a winner right when that was
Right.
going on.
And I mentioned election night. We cannot talk this week without referring back to it and the shutdown, which we're going to get to. It was of course a big night for Dems. Winning this week several key races, including governorships in New Jersey, Virginia, the mayoralty of New York City, and I mentioned generational change. Of course, we have this contest where Seth Moulton is thrown his hat in the ring, saying Senator Ed Markey is too old, basically. I mean, you've said that's his main pitch.
That's his case against Markey, yeah.
Right. And now he tweeted out after those big wins for Dems, he tweeted in part that a diverse array of Democratic candidates won with, quote, the same mission, bringing new ideas and generational change to our party. The Markey campaign says those election results show voters want politicians who will forcefully fight the president and his agenda, and they say that's what Markey has done.
Yeah, isn't it nice how each one of them has a narrative that they can glom onto?
Yes.
That makes the races that we just saw resolved on Tuesday work in their favor. Yeah, it's you can spin it either way, and I think there's probably a degree of validity to both of those spins. We did see polling come out this week from UMass that showed Markey leading Moulton by a decent margin, leading him by a slimmer margin were Ayanna Pressley to get into the race, which is a hypothetical. But yeah, they can each make their case, and they're going to be making their case for more than, we've got what?
Yes.
Not quite more than a year.
Yeah.
We've got almost a year until next year's Democratic primary. So we'll be hearing these arguments again and again and again and again and again.
Now, you mentioned the UMass poll. It was a mixed picture for Governor Healey in that poll.
Fascinatingly mixed picture for
Tell
Governor
us.
Healey. Well, she has a good approval rating, not quite Charlie Baker level, but 57% of people approve of the job that she's doing. She leads all of her would-be Republican challengers by a pretty wide margin, so that's great for the governor. What's not so great is that 58% of people, that's within the margin of error, but a little more than approve of her, say she's not doing enough to address the state's housing crunch. Also, the sort of right track, wrong track picture is mixed for Healey. 40% of people say Massachusetts is on the right track. 43% say it's on the wrong track, which aren't numbers that you want as an incumbent. Now, the good news for her there is that only 22% of people say the country is on the right track. The country, that is.
Right.
70% say the country's on the wrong track. So people are more bullish on the state of Massachusetts than they are on the state of the country. But they're not getting everything from Governor Healey that they want. Her ability to make housing more affordable, it's limited as governor. And I think that what we see here is sort of a recognition of the fact that she can only do so much, hence her high approval rating. But people are still really, really frustrated with the cost of housing, as they should be. I don't know how anyone kind of gets their start in the housing market these days. It's so brutal.
And economics is certainly a big theme here, especially the exit polls from some of these key races I mentioned said it was a pocketbook election for many of these people.
Yeah, and we heard commentary earlier in the national broadcast from people saying that President Trump isn't focusing enough on affordability issues. So, yeah, definitely a theme.
And speaking of President Trump being accused of not focusing on affordability issues, Massachusetts Congressman Katherine Clark, she's the Democratic whip, she was on NPR Election Day morning dunning the president in a way that, given that exit polling that we have now in those victories, sounds almost prescient.
He is so busy building ballrooms, holding great Gatsby celebrations, sending $40 billion to Argentina while he's making the choice to withhold food. Talk about holding hostages. It's outrageous behavior that they will not come to the table to work on making life easier and less expensive.
That's a pretty cogent and punchy condemnation of the president, obviously from a very partisan perspective. But I think, we're going to hear a lot of Democrats saying things very similar to what Katherine Clark said in those comments. That's going to be a refrain between now and the midterm elections that I think we should print that out and see how closely all the Democrats who are running for higher office hew to that. And I think it's going to be very closely.
GBH politics reporter Adam Reilly, thank you as always.
Good to talk to you, Mark.
This is GBH.